Last unit, Unit 6 of World History Credit Recovery, and we're going to be talking about contemporary American history. So most of the things are going to be happening from the year 1900 on. Now, full disclosure, a lot of the things that we talked about in American history, you're going to hear again. So I'm going to be breaking up a lot of these lessons just because it's a lot happening, but these events are what's going to shape the 20th century. So let's get started with World War I, the causes and the effects. And you're going to notice the perspective on this is going to be more from a world-based than the American-based from before. So again, we are going to be looking for the causes and effects that we normally have been, but we have a new standard. We're going to assess the impact of conflict on international relations and diplomacy on international relations. So conflict like wars and diplomacy like talking. So you're going to notice that these two things are going to shape the 20th century quite a bit. So going into today's lesson, we're going to get into the causes and the effects of World War I. So everything I did in 3 lessons in American history, I condensed down to 1 here. So why does all this matter is because World War I changed the world, literally and figuratively. And it also set up the second major world event of the 20th century of World War II. So these two gentlemen, I've already spoiled the fun before, but this is Hitler, this is Mussolini, leader of Germany, leader of Italy during World War II. They're going to be angry how World War I ended. Long story short, they're going to want revenge. So when you get into the causes of World War I, again, it's mania, militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and assassination. When I taught this lesson the first time in American history, I talked about how this is really a world history thing, and this is where the world history comes in. So if you look at the map, all those different countries that we have talked about in the past, that's what we're going to focus on today. So when you look at militarism, the first cause of World War I, you're going to notice that people are going to start dumping money into the military because tensions, because of imperialism, if you remember from last unit, are going to get tight and high. So therefore, they're going to start building up their military, knowing that crap was going to hit the fan, and when it did, it did. And Germany were super jealous about all the people that were taking over parts of Africa, and they weren't really getting a whole lot, so they were building up their military. So if you see the stats there of what they were doing and what they were producing, it only made sense that they were kind of leading the charge. When you get into alliances, when they knew that imperialism was causing these bad bloods and that tension was growing, they started getting people on their side, if you will, having each other's backs. So you can see who was on whose side: Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, and then France, Russia, and Great Britain. And if you look at how those alliances work out, we are going to eventually join this side, the Triple Entente. Nationalism, again, with people exploring the world at this point, kind of staking their claim around the world. Nationalism is going to hit a little bit close to home here in the Middle East. And you're going to know that Austria-Hungary is going to basically overpower and over Serbia. They're going to say how they're much better, or they're better than other people, and Serbia's going to take offense to it. So again, if this was a normal class, I'd probably go in a little bit more in depth with this, but for world history perspective, why it led to World War I, that's basically the gist of what you need to know. Imperialism, I've already beat this thing to death, especially in Unit 5, but again, going out to other foreign parts of the world, taking them over, taking their resources to fuel that industrial revolution of what we were just talking about, and it's going to cause bad blood. And again, this is where Germany is going to come back in, and that's kind of why they did what they did. And then is the assassination. So the leader of Austria-Hungary is not assassinated. It's the second in command, if you will, the prince, if you will. So this is Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He was the poor soul that kind of caught the brunt of it. And when he's assassinated, because of that nationalistic pride, because of the alliances, this is what's really going to spark the World War I to go. So where it all kind of came back as again is that Austria-Hungary tried to do the right thing. They said, hey, Serbia, turn over the guy that killed our leader, and everything's all good in the hood. But they didn't do it, and therefore, that's why the war broke out. So when you look at the domino effects of things, of who declared war on who, and because of the alliances, and the dates of how fast it all worked out, it all happened fairly quickly. So when the lines are drawn, going back to the lines as I established before, they are now fighting each other. So now that all this is happening, you need to know who's on what side officially. So here's a good graphic to kind of fill it all in and how they got there, meaning did they just were they agreed to help each other? Did they sign an official treaty? Or did they just basically say, hey, we're just going to get each other's back? And then you can kind of get the gist of it. So here's my first question. A country that is building up their military, or building up their army, artillery, and products of war would be an example of. And then a country that is proud of their country or shows extreme patriotism is an example of. If a country takes over multiple smaller, weaker countries and country B is jealous of country A, that shows which cause. If someone were to kill the leader of another country, that would be an example of. A country that pledges to protect another country during wartime is an example of.